He said it without looking at me. Not a whisper, not a hesitation. Just a flat, businesslike statement delivered to the man across the desk like I wasn't sitting 2 feet away. She doesn't really follow financial stuff anymore. Just keep it simple for her. I had my reading glasses on. I had the folder open. I had already found the clause on page 4 before either of them had finished shaking hands. My son Daniel didn't lower his voice. He never did when he was managing something. And in the last few years, I had become something he managed. The financial advisor, a man named Mr. Hargrove, late 40s, tan from somewhere that wasn't Ohio, blinked once and looked at me with that careful, practiced neutrality people use when they've just witnessed something they aren't sure how to categorize. I took off my glasses, folded them slowly, and set them on top of the folder. Actually, I said, I'd like to go back to section 2, the part about the automatic reallocation. Mr. Hargrove straightened. Of course, Mrs. Calloway. Daniel exhaled through his nose. It was a sound I had heard my whole life. First when he was 9 and I told him he couldn't have a second piece of cake. Then when he was 32 and I told him I wasn't co-signing his third investment property. Now, at 44, it meant the same thing it always had. He thought I was being difficult. I wasn't being difficult. I was reading. This clause, I said, pointing to the paragraph, states that if I'm deemed unable to manage the account, and the determination of that is made by the primary contact listed, which appears to be you, Daniel, then the portfolio automatically shifts to a conservative allocation and you gain full management authority. Is that correct? Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat. Yes, it's a common protective structure. It ensures continuity. Continuity for whom? Silence. Daniel leaned forward. Mom, it's just a safeguard. In case you ever get confused, or if something happened. I'm not confused, I said. I'm reading. He looked at the ceiling briefly, the way he did when he thought I was being unreasonable but couldn't say so in polite company. I closed the folder. I'd like a version without that clause, I said to Mr. Hargrove, and I'd like my own advisor present before I sign anything. Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly. Nicole, his wife, sitting beside him in a coat the color of cream, said nothing. She rarely did in rooms like this. She saved her words for later. Mom, Daniel said carefully, we came here today specifically to finalize this. We've already gone over everything. You've gone over everything, I said. I've just arrived. I picked up my purse, thanked Mr. Hargrove for his time, and walked out first. The parking lot was gray and flat. October doing what October does in Indiana, stripping everything down, leaving the trees with nothing left to hide behind. I sat in my car for a long time before I started the engine. The heater kicked on slow, the way it always did since Bob passed and no one changed the cabin filter like he used to. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I kept waiting for it, and it never came. Just a long, tired clarity. The kind that arrives when something you've been half ignoring finally steps fully into the light. He'd called me incompetent in front of a stranger. Not in those words. That was never Daniel's way. He was too careful for that. Too polished from 20 years of closing deals and sitting across tables from people who needed to trust him. He knew how to sand the edges off a thing, but what he'd said and what he'd meant were the same. She doesn't follow this. She doesn't understand. Move the pieces around her, not with her. I drove home the long way, past the elementary school where I spent 31 years, the last 12 as principal. Past the little diner on Maple where Bob and I used to eat on Sunday mornings after church. Past the house where Daniel grew up, sold now to a young couple who painted the shutters green. I didn't mind the green. I just needed the drive. The house was quiet when I got in. My house. The one Bob and I bought in 1987. The one where Daniel took his first steps on the kitchen linoleum and cried at the bottom of the stairs the morning he left for college. The one I had paid off with my own pension. My own 30 years of early mornings and difficult parents and budget meetings and children nobody else wanted to deal with. My name on the deed, my sweat in the walls. I made coffee and sat at the table with a legal pad. I had a list to start. The call from my own financial advisor came 2 days later. Patricia Webb, who I'd found on my own 3 years ago and had never told Daniel about, mostly because Daniel had a habit of inserting himself into things I hadn't invited him into. The clause is aggressive, Patricia said, particularly because the trigger for incapacity is entirely subjective. He determines when you're not capable. There's no physician requirement, no independent evaluation, just his word. How long has that been in there? A pause. The original account was opened in your name alone. This structure was added 14 months ago as a modification request, signed by you, but the modification form was submitted digitally. 14 months ago, I had been recovering from hip surgery. Daniel had brought over a tablet and said it was just a routine update to keep everything organized. I'd trusted him. I closed my eyes. I want it reversed, I said. All of it. I'll start the paperwork this week. I said thank you and hung up. Then I sat very still for a minute, listening to the refrigerator hum and a car pass on the street outside. And I thought about all the things that had been updated quietly while I was distracted or recovering or simply trusting. The dinner wasn't something I found out about from Daniel. I found out from Cassie. She called on a Thursday evening, her voice doing that careful thing it did when she was trying to figure out how to say something without hurting me. Grandma, I don't know if you know about the party on Saturday. Dad's firm is celebrating its 10-year anniversary. He's rented out Riverside Hall. It's kind of a big deal. 10 years. Daniel had started his real estate development firm a decade ago. The same year I lent him $60,000 to bridge the gap on his initial capital. The same year, I'd also watched his first 2 daughters on alternating weekends so he and Nicole could work without paying for childcare. The same year, I'd put my name on a piece of paper that helped him look more credible to his first investors. I hadn't heard about it, I said. Cassie went quiet in that particular way of someone who has just stepped into something they didn't fully anticipate. I assumed he'd invited you. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have said something earlier. It's all right, sweetheart. It's not all right, she said, and her voice cracked just a little at the edge. She was 24, Cassie. Daniel the oldest from his first marriage. She had her father's dark eyes and none of his polish. She wore her heart where everyone could see it and made no apologies for that. She'd been showing up at my house for as long as I could remember, not for anything in particular, just to show up. Soup, when I had my surgery. Christmas lights 2 years running when my back wouldn't let me do the latter. Coffee on random Tuesday afternoons when she had a gap between nursing school classes. Are you going? She asked. I looked out at the backyard. The garden Bob and I had built together over 30 years. The rose bushes I still cut back every fall. The flagstone path we had laid ourselves on our 25th anniversary weekend, with blistered hands and sore knees and a bottle of wine between us. I'm thinking about it, I said. She was quiet again. Then, I'll save you a seat if you come. You won't need to, I said. Saturday evening, I wore the charcoal dress I'd bought for my niece's wedding 2 springs ago. The one Patricia had said made me look like someone who knew what she was doing. I wore Bob's favorite earrings, the small ones with the pearl drops he'd given me for our 30th anniversary, and I drove to Riverside Hall with the radio off. I parked across the street and sat for a moment looking at the entrance. Strings of warm light around the doors, men in good suits. Women in heels I hadn't worn in a decade but recognized. Caterers in white shirts moving efficiently behind the glass. $60,000 of mine in that building, somewhere in the foundation of a decade's worth of success. I got out of the car. The event was exactly as I imagined it. Beautiful, impersonal, carefully curated. The kind of event where everything is positioned. The flowers, the lighting, the framed photos of the company's milestones on the walls. I looked at those photos as I came in. Groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings, awards. Daniel grinning in all of them, arm around investors, partners, city council members. Not once was I in a single frame. A young woman at the door asked my name and I gave it. She looked at her list with slightly too much focus, then looked up again. Mrs. Calloway. I don't see, let me just check with. I'm Daniel Calloway's mother, I said pleasantly. I'll find him myself. I walked in before she could finish her sentence. The room was full and warm and loud in that comfortable party way. I walked through it slowly, greeting no one, looking for one person. I found Cassie first, near the back, holding a glass of sparkling water, eyes already on me with an expression somewhere between relief and worry. She crossed the room quickly. Grandma. She hugged me, tighter than the setting called for. Don't make a fuss, I said quietly. I just came to see. Daniel found me about 4 minutes later. He appeared at my side with a smile already assembled, the kind he used at closings. Mom. His voice was low, controlled. I am the didn't know you were coming. I noticed. The smile held. He glanced around quickly, checking who was within hearing range. Old habit of his, he'd always managed his reputation with the same precision he managed his properties. There must have been some confusion with the invitations. Nicole handled the list. Daniel, I said, cutting through it cleanly, I didn't come here to be explained to. I came because $63,000 of this company belonged to me first, and I wanted to see what it became. His face didn't crumble. He was too trained for that. But something behind it shifted, rearranged itself, tried to find the correct response. I'm glad you came, he said finally. I know, I said, because now you can't pretend I don't exist. I stayed 40 minutes, long enough to have a glass of water, speak briefly with 2 of his partners who were genuinely warm to me, and let the room see me there. I kissed Cassie on the cheek on my way out. I did not say goodbye to Daniel or Nicole. Walking back to my car, I felt something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite satisfaction. It was more like the feeling after a long conversation you'd been putting off. Necessary. Complete. Monday morning, I called Patricia again. I want to change the beneficiary on the life insurance policy, I said, and the retirement accounts. All of them. To whom? Cassie. Cassandra Marie Calloway. A brief pause. That's Daniel's daughter from his first marriage. Yes. He'll notice immediately when the statements go out. I'm counting on it. After I hung up, I went to the dining room table where I'd spread out every financial document I could find. Bank statements, quarterly reports, the folder from Mr. Hargrove's office that I'd taken without signing. I put on my glasses, the good ones, not the ones I wore for reading at night, and I went through each page the way I used to go through school budgets, carefully, line by line. What I found took me an hour to fully process. Over 6 years, various transfers had been made. Some I remembered. Most I had approved without looking carefully enough, a guilt I was done carrying. A monthly transfer to cover Daniel and Nicole's home equity line. Installment payments to what I now recognized was their vacation property in Michigan. A recurring charge to a private school I hadn't realized was for their youngest, never asked, never discussed, simply added to my account as if it belonged there naturally. I added it up. The number was not small. I made another list. I called the bank. The woman at the branch knew me. I'd had my accounts there for 30 years. She didn't question me when I asked to speak with the manager. The manager was a patient, thorough man named Gerald who listened carefully and took notes and helped me reverse every automatic transfer I did not remember explicitly authorizing. Would you like to notify the account holders of the changes? He asked. No, I said. Let the next statement do that. He nodded, understanding more than he let on. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. I'd like to open a separate account, trust-based. Beneficiary is my granddaughter. Conditions on access until she turns 27 or demonstrates financial need. We were there for 2 hours. When I stepped outside, the afternoon was cool and bright. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and breathed. The rope had always been there. I just finally noticed it was tied to me. The first call came that evening. Daniel. I watched the phone ring 4 times and go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. The second call was Nicole. I ignored it. The third was a text, 3 hours later. Mom, the bank called about some account changes. Can we talk? I set the phone face down and finished a book I'd been reading for 3 weeks. Cassie called the next morning, nervous and bright at the same time. Grandma, something's happening. Dad is. I'd never seen him like this. He and Nicole were on the phone half the night. Are you all right? I asked. Me? I'm fine. Are you? I'm better than I've been in a while. A pause, and then, quietly, did you really change everything? I changed what was mine to change. She didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear her breathing, hear the shift of something settling in her. I didn't ask you to do this. I know, I said. That's precisely why. She came over that afternoon with a container of chicken soup and a look on her face like someone who had been handed something heavy and was still deciding how to hold it. I made coffee. She sat at my kitchen table, the same way she had since she was 7 years old, elbows on the wood, sneakers on the chair rung. Tell me the truth, she said. Are you doing this because you're angry? I thought about that honestly. I'm doing this because I finally stopped being afraid of what happens when I stop. She looked at me carefully. What do you mean? For a long time, I believed that if I pulled back, the money, the favors, the signing whatever they put in front of me, they'd stop loving me altogether. I thought I was buying connection. I wrapped my hands around my mug. But connection you have to buy was never connection, it was just commerce. She was quiet for a long time. Dad's gonna try to fix it. He might. He'll come here. He will. And what will you say? I smiled a little. I'll say what I should have said in that financial advisor's office. That I understand more than they've given me credit for. That I have for a long time. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her grandmother's hands, Bob always said. Long fingers, quick and warm. Daniel came on Wednesday evening. I saw his car in the driveway and took my time coming to the door. When I opened it, he looked like someone who had rehearsed twice and was now uncertain about the script. Mom. He stepped forward slightly, not quite asking to come in. I stepped aside and let him. He sat at the kitchen table, both hands flat on the surface, and looked at me with what I recognized as his negotiation face. Calm, reasonable, slightly pained. He'd closed hundreds of deals with that face. I want to understand what happened, he said. I know you do, I said, sitting across from him. You want to understand it, so you can explain to me why I've made a mistake. He exhaled. That's not fair. Daniel. I kept my voice even. At that man's office, in front of a stranger, you told him I don't understand financial things, that he should keep it simple for me. I watched him start to form a protest and I continued before he could. You did not ask me, you did not warn me, you just decided, in public, that I was no longer capable of speaking for myself. He looked at the table. I wrote trying to make it easier. For whom? Silence. You've been making things easier for yourself for a long time, I said. The transfers, the property payments, the school tuition I apparently agreed to at some point on a tablet I could barely see after surgery. I kept my voice steady. I'm not angry about the money, Daniel. I'm telling you the truth about what the money was. It was the price I thought I had to pay to stay in your life. His throat moved. He looked like someone trying to remember when exactly the story shifted. That's not who we are, he said finally. It's who we became, I said. Quietly, gradually, and I let it happen. That's on me too. He looked up. His eyes were different than I expected. Not defensive, just tired. Surprised by something he wasn't ready to name. I didn't know you felt this way. You didn't ask. A long silence settled between us. Not hostile, just honest. What do you want me to do? He asked. I want you to come to dinner without needing anything from me, I said. I want you to call on a Tuesday when there's no paperwork involved. I wrote the rules, broke them. I wrote the rules, broke them. I am the game. I wrote the rules, broke them, free. You ruined how to manage people. He swallowed. And if I do that, then we'll see. He left an hour later. He didn't promise anything, and I was glad of that. Promises made in kitchens at the wrong moment rarely held. But he hugged me before he walked out, the kind of hug that was clumsy and not quite enough, and almost there, the kind that meant something was still in him that hadn't been managed away completely. I stood in the doorway and watched him drive off in the dark. My own attorney, Patricia Webb, had been thorough. She'd scheduled the formal document review for the second week of November, early afternoon. Her office on the fourth floor of a building downtown where the windows looked out over the river. I wore my gray dress again, the one that meant business. Daniel and Nicole arrived first. Cassie came with me. Patricia entered without ceremony, placed a folder in front of each person and said, Mrs. Calloway has updated her estate documents comprehensively. We're here today for transparency. She requested that all immediate family members be present for the review. Nicole's hands were folded on the table in that careful way of hers, knuckles almost white. Patricia read through the documents. The retirement accounts, the life insurance, the trust for Cassie, the revocation of all management authority previously granted informally. The letter of instruction she'd helped me draft, 2 pages, clear and precise. When she finished, she read the personal note I'd included at the end. I am 68 years old. I taught children for 31 years. I managed a staff of 42, a budget of $3 million, and a school community that depended on me to get things right. I have never needed anyone to keep it simple for me. What I have given this family, I gave freely. What was taken, I'm reclaiming. Not out of anger, but out of the same clarity that made me good at everything I spent my life doing. There is one person in this family who treated me like someone still present, still whole, still worth asking about. She gets the house. She gets the accounts. She gets everything I built because she understood what it meant. To everyone else, I love you. But love that costs me my dignity was never a fair transaction. I'm renegotiating. The room was quiet. Nicole looked at the table. Daniel looked at me for a long moment with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something past surprise. Something older. Cassie's jaw was tight with the effort of not crying. You can contest it, Patricia said to Daniel, professionally, evenly, but I'd advise against it. Daniel shook his head slowly. I'm not contesting it. Nicole looked at him. He didn't look back at her. Mom, he said. His voice had nothing of the office in it. I'm sorry. Not I'm sorry if this upset you. Not I'm sorry if this upset you. Not I'm sorry you felt that way. Just the plain 2 words. I looked at him for a long moment. I know, I said. We didn't embrace in the hallway. We weren't there yet, and I wasn't going to perform a reconciliation for the sake of the room. But when we reached the elevator, he held the door open for me with a careful, deliberate gesture, and I stepped through. It was a beginning. Small and uncertain. That was enough. 6 weeks after the reading, the mornings were colder. The kind of mid-December cold that gets into the windowsills and reminds you to check the weather stripping. Cassie had come over the weekend before to help me sort through the garage, the project Bob and I had always meant to do together and never quite finished. She found his old toolbox, just stood there holding it for a moment with both hands. Tell me something about him, she said, something nobody else knows. I thought for a moment. He could never parallel park. Not in 37 years. He would circle a block 4 times before he'd attempt it. He once drove 3 blocks to a parking garage to avoid a spot right in front of the restaurant. She laughed, and it filled the garage like it used to fill the kitchen when she was small. I had not heard from Nicole. That was fine. Some things needed longer than 6 weeks. Daniel had called twice. Not about anything. Once to tell me about a property he was working on that he thought was interesting. Once to ask how my knees were after the change in weather. Both calls were short, slightly awkward, nothing like the easy phone calls we'd had 20 years ago. But they were something. They were trying. I had started writing letters again. Not to send, mostly, just to think. Pages in a spiral notebook I kept in the drawer of the secretary desk by the front window. Some of them were to Bob. Some of them were to the version of myself who had sat in that financial advisor's office and almost signed the wrong document to keep the peace. I told her she'd done all right. The Saturday before Christmas, Cassie came over with groceries and her laptop and her enormous canvas bag that contained, at any given time, approximately the entire contents of her apartment. She made breakfast while I sat at the table with my coffee and read the newspaper the way I had every Saturday morning since 1983. "Grandma," she said, cracking eggs into the pan, "do you think everything happened the way it was supposed to?" I considered. I think some things happen the way they should, and some things happen the way they have to. She looked over her shoulder. "What's the difference?" "The first kind you receive," I said. "The second kind you make." She turned back to the stove, and we let that sit between us comfortably. The eggs crackled. A car went slowly down the street outside. The heater kicked on with its old familiar sound. Later, after we'd eaten, and she'd told me about her clinicals and a patient who had reminded her of me, she was completely unimpressed by everyone's credentials, and it was magnificent. She reached into that enormous bag and pulled out a small card. "This is from me," she said. "Not a holiday card. Just read it." I opened it. Inside, in her careful, slightly lopsided handwriting, "You showed me that getting older doesn't mean getting smaller. I'll remember that in every room I walk into for the rest of my life." I held it for a moment without speaking. "Don't cry, Grandma," she said, though her own voice had gone a little uneven. "I'm not crying," I said. "I'm deciding where to put this." I put it on the mantel. Between the photo of Bob on our 40th anniversary and the small wooden cardinal he carved one winter when the snow kept him inside. It looked like it had always been there. Outside, the first snow of the season was starting to come down, soft and unhurried, settling on the rose bushes and the flagstone path and the windowsills of the house that was still mine. I stood at the window and watched it for a long time. There was a version of me that had almost disappeared quietly, that had signed the wrong paper, paid the wrong price, nodded and receded, and let herself be managed out of her own life like a closing entry on a balance sheet. I had come close, closer than I liked to admit. But here I was, 68 years old, standing in my own kitchen, watching the snow fall on my own garden, with a letter on my own mantel that said I had mattered to someone in the way that counts. The pen had always been mine. I'd just forgotten to pick it up. I wasn't going to forget again. If this story found you at the right moment, share it. Someone else might need to remember that it's not too late to take the pen back.